On April 4th of 2023, I interviewed Laney College carpentry professor Matthew Wolpe to share some insights about our career and technical education offerings at Laney College. And it was a great kind of warm-up to our career and technical education open house, which was held on April 29th of that same month. Hope you enjoy listening. Well, Felicia, one department that will be tabling at this event is our Carpentry Department. And with that, it is a pleasure to welcome Professor Matthew Wolpe to the President's Desk.
Welcome, Matthew.
Professor, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay to call you Matthew or
Yes,
Matt? Okay.
Matt or Matthew.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. So what are you teaching this semester?
Yeah, I teach 3 classes this semester. So beginning carpentry, which is kind of the entry class to people joining our department for the first time. I teach finished carpentry, which is more advanced class where we go through the finishing details of a house. And then I teach digital fabrication, which we use the Fab Lab on campus, design things on the computer, and then send it to the machines to fabricate what we design.
What's a Fab Lab?
The Fab Lab is an amazing resource that we have on campus. It's down underneath the theater building, and it's a place where you could go. There's staff available Monday through Thursday, and specialty machines. So things like 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC routers, and those machines are all compatible with design software. And so you design something on the computer, and then the staff will help you fabricate and actually make that in 3D in the Fab Lab.
Wow. What are some things that you've seen come out, not necessarily carpentry, but finished products out of a Fab Lab that you've seen produced?
Yeah, lots of things. I mean, in my class, there's more of an emphasis on kind of furniture and product design. So the best thing, I think the main advantage of a Fab Lab is you can do rapid prototyping. So you can make, if you're designing a chair, for instance, there's a lot of considerations that go into making a chair. Mm-hmm. You can make several different versions really quickly on a laser cutter, and then evaluate those designs, and then make changes in your model, and then make a more higher resolution model, and then keep going, and then actually make a finished version using the CNC machine.
Felicia, I had to ask that question because the first time I saw work in a Fab Lab, they actually designed chess pieces.
Mm. Wow, that's small. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those were some of the things. Now, you mentioned finished carpentry. I kind of, just in queuing up for the show, I was ready to ask you what finished carpentry is, and you've already answered that question. So I'll ask this question. Yeah. Somebody comes and takes your finished carpentry class.
Yeah.
What might they be able to do after that in terms of work?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'll back up a little bit and say that finished carpentry is kind of the next step after beginning carpentry. Both classes together go through building a house from start to finish. So,
all right. So I'm a listener, and I'm like, I always wanted to get in carpentry. I hear about the beginning and the finish.
Yeah.
How much time should I budget to do both classes? How many months do I need to do both of them?
Right. So each class meets 1 day a week from 8 a.m. to 3:20 p.m. So you can take one semester and then one the next semester, or you can dedicate 2 days a week and take both classes at once.
Okay, so you could potentially do it in a semester
yes.
in 3 to 4 months.
Yes.
Okay.
But to answer your question, finished carpentry is everything that you see and touch when you're inside of a finished house. So if you think of the rough carpentry as the frame of the house, the structure, what's holding it up, then finished carpentry deals with everything that you actually interact with when you're inside of a finished house. They might not be the structural elements, but they're the things that are visually most noticeable. So, yeah.
Okay, so you were on hand when I asked Professor Ulloa, our music instructor, just about and we talked about her specializations. Do you consider yourself a specialist?
I inadvertently kind of have become a tiny house specialist because this is on campus this is our 6th tiny house. So I have gone through that process a lot. And then, when we do everything, we do the rough framing, the interior finish work, the furniture, the plumbing, the electrical, everything in-house on campus. And so I guess I've become kind of come a tiny house person.
So what is a tiny house, and can you tell us about the program?
Sure. So tiny house is, as you can imagine, very small, built on a trailer. So it's mobile. And it's similar to ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in that they have recently become legalized in Oakland. So you can actually legally have a tiny house and or an ADU in your yard, which is a way of adding housing and adding density to the city.
Can you explain to me what an ADU is?
Sure, sorry. ADU stands for accessory dwelling unit. So almost like an in-law unit, a small apartment or standalone house that is in the yard of a main house.
Right, okay.
So there's a big emphasis on, you know, adding more housing stock to the area given the housing crisis.
Right.
So what we try to do, so we have a lot of students that are interested in doing that themselves, or obviously getting into the construction industry. And there's lots of different places that we can put them if they're interested in specifically working on these accessory dwelling units or working on single family housing.
So what has the Tiny Homes program done for Oakland?
Yeah, many things. So the best part about the tiny house program is that, one, it's really engaging for students, and students seem to really enjoy building it. But we also have partner organizations. So we build the house for a nonprofit organization that needs that house. So for instance, we're building for a group called Shelterwood Collective right now. They are in Sonoma County, and they land stewards that help on basically are helping to do sustainable forestry in such a way as to make Sonoma County less wildfire prone. And they're doing that and centering queer and people of color in particular. And so that we have like a direct community application, and find that really motivating for students. And then other previous houses of ours have gone to other organizations, and a couple have actually gone to the city of Oakland.
Okay. You mentioned just your project and serving just our diverse community of students, and I know you were on hand for the Women in Trades event. Could you tell us a little bit about what that was and what it was about?
Yeah, so that was a panel discussion with, I believe, 4 panelists, specifically talking about their experience being women in the trades. And the trades are conventionally not a very hospitable place for women. And so our emphasis at Laney is to try to change that narrative. So we had 2 faculty members in the Carpentry Department that were there, Evie Ortiz and Cynthia Correa, talking about their experience and also having a very honest discussion about what's challenging, what things that have helped them, things that they still think need to be done and addressed. So I thought it was a really interesting, juicy discussion.
Yeah, and Felicia, I sense that Professor Correa might be invited to be a future guest right here on the president's desk, because talking to her, she's got some stories to tell, to say the least. All right, so we're not going to give away everything, but like me, you grew up in Denver.
That's right.
Anything you miss about it?
I miss the... well, recently I've missed the dryness. I miss...
That's right.
Yeah, a mile high, there's very little humidity. That's true.
I also miss the... Well, you know, people think of Colorado as obviously mountainous, but Denver is actually quite flat. And so I'm a cyclist and I like biking. So when I go back to Denver, I can bike around the city really easily. Here, not so
road or
much.
mountain?
Road.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So what if you have a bike right now, what kind is it?
I have a Bianchi.
Okay, you're serious.
Fancy.
Yeah,
You're
not that fancy. Not that fancy. It's old, but so yeah, the hills around here are hard, but yeah.
So students in carpentry have available to them the advanced carpentry degree, and then there are also certificates in carpentry. What does that career ladder look like once they finish those programs, or potentially maybe mid-program getting hired? What does that trajectory look like? Could you tell our audience about that?
Sure, yeah. So there's lots of options. The main option is working for a contractor and then pursuing becoming a contractor themselves. So the class hours that you accumulate while at Laney contribute to the hours needed for having your contractor's license. So for one avenue is going towards being a contractor. The other is working for a contractor, and that's usually the starting point. And we teach specifically residential construction, so it's usually working for a smaller home builder or renovator. And where you start is dependent on experience. So the more classes you've taken at Laney, the higher up you'll start as far as wages and the kinds of work that you'll be doing when you enter the field. So that's what I always tell students, is that it's really beneficial to take a certificate program at Laney, and then you'll start at a higher wage level. You also start doing skilled labor instead of just labor.
Really pleased to be talking to Professor Matthew Wolpe right here at the President's Desk on 96.9 KGPC. Professor Wolpe, if a person is driving to the 5 from the Bay Area, certainly the amount of empty space is disappearing. Similarly, if you're driving something they probably have to do,
Interesting question. They don't have to.
especially in the residential area.
In the residential, there's a lot of building to be done, building work available here without moving. And honestly, we have a hard time keeping people in the program sometimes because there are so many jobs available. So I think if you want to work, you can stay right here, but you can also certainly go out to some of those new developments. Yeah.
At last year's open house, though, one thing I found, this happened talking to 3 different industry partners, was that they seem to understand that their new hires, if they continue at Laney while working, that there's a benefit not only to the student as a future employee, but to them as a company. So hopefully that's a message that continues as we move forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So certainly we are in, let's just say, a very welcoming area in terms of collective bargaining, unions, things like that. Someone who finishes your program, should they expect to be part of a union?
Good question. The short answer is no. And the main reason for that is that we focus on residential carpentry, and unions are specifically for commercial carpentry. So build big buildings going on up downtown, those are in the realm of the union. Usually single family homes are not going to be union labor.
Okay.
I would think that.
Interesting.
I am slightly interested in electrician. And as an engineer, I'm looking to develop that skill.
Sign up at Laney. We have a great program, Felicia. Go ahead.
And in the tiny homes, I'm back to that. I can't. How do you provide electricity to those little things?
Yeah. So they usually are parked at a place where they can connect to the panel at the main house. So the current house we're building, for instance, is 50 amps. So it can get 50 amps from the main box where it's going. And then we distribute that to all the appliances that we have in the house. And there's a full kitchen, full bathroom, hot water heater, all the things. And we have residential electrical class in carpentry, and they do the wiring for the house.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Going to steal a question that I asked Professor Ulloa earlier. Within carpentry, as you're kind of building up your skill set, and I imagine it's a constant journey, correct?
Correct. Always.
What's the thing that you're kind of tinkering with right now? An area that's becoming kind of an area of interest for you that's maybe not in your comfort zone?
Good question. I would say there's 2 things, but the main one is building really energy efficient housing. The code for building housing is usually the minimum that's required. And buildings are one of the biggest users of electricity in their heating and cooling. And so building energy efficient, there's new materials and new technologies and new techniques that go into that. And so that's what I've been learning about recently, is how to build really energy efficient houses that, can be heated with the amount of energy that goes into a hairdryer, for instance, could actually heat a home. Yeah.
On the front end, though, is that cost prohibitive?
It's high. It is more costs. They say about 10% more. Yes. The savings would be in your utility bills over time. But yeah, that's the dilemma with building, is like trade-offs for everything. And so building with really beautiful materials that have integrity and energy efficient will be more expensive. Yeah.
I have a quick question. When you say energy efficient, how does that affect global warming?
Yeah. Great question. So buildings use about 30% of all carbon emissions are used in buildings. So heating, cooling, lighting, and then all the appliances that we plug in. And so we're in buildings most of the time, most of our lives. And so the resources we consume are literally built into the infrastructure of construction and buildings. And so the more energy efficient we can make our buildings and homes, the less we'll consume. And that's huge,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Great question, Allison. Felicia, I sense we're going to need more microphones here in the studio with all these great guests and all these great co-hosts. So, Matt, carpentry, wood technology, similarities, differences. Could you speak to those? Because we also have an amazing wood technology department at Laney.
That's right, and they're right next door. So we're definitely like sibling departments. But the main distinction I'd say is that carpentry builds the house. Wood technology builds all the things that go into the house. So if let's say, for instance, furniture and cabinetry. So the things that when you move from one house to another and you take with you, those are usually built in wood technology. The house itself is built in carpentry. There is overlap and crossover, and we work closely with them, but that's the main distinction, I'd say.
Kind of outside versus inside.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great way to understand it. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. So I'm listening to this program. I'm a community member. I'm not sure about a career. Maybe I want to try a new career. Mm-hmm. I'm hearing about carpentry right now. If I go into your classroom for the first time, in terms of the resources that are available inside the classroom that will help me learn, what's there?
Oh, we have all the tools you'll need. We have space. We have lumber. So pretty much with those three things and good instructors, you can show up without having any previous experience and be part of building a house.
Okay, so I want to back up a second. Okay. Convention tells me hammer, nails, saw.
Yeah.
What other tools would I learn about, and what other ones would I learn to use?
Tape measure, for one. That's the primary thing that we use. And then there's a magical tool called the speed square, which is a little marking tool. It's a square, but it does a million different things. And so speed square, tape measure, hammer, saw, you can do pretty much anything with.
Okay. How has technology changed those things over the years?
It hasn't really, to be honest. I mean, we're kind of build houses with what we've been using for the last 50 years. I'd say there is innovation in kind of the mass production of housing and the bigger picture and automation, but it's funny, carpenters kind of haven't really evolved all that much.
Yeah. Oh no, I appreciate that answer. And if nothing else, I think there's some reassurance and stability.
Yes, we won't get replaced by robots.
So,
Great.
Speaking of which, earlier today, and Raya was on and talked about the kind of the training that was offered to our ESOL students who are interested in finding work. Every industry, the job search process, the interview process, the building of, portfolio or whatever it might be, is different. Mm-hmm. So I'm a carpentry student. I'm listening to this broadcast and I'm thinking about applying for a job. Mm-hmm. What should I expect in terms of the job search process and what it looks like?
There's a good question. Well, for one, as instructors, we hear of opportunities that we pass on to the students. So there is fabulous inside information that you have by going to Laney. There's also places specifically to look for jobs in the trades. But what we also do is try to prepare students to be attractive to folks that are hiring. I encourage them to make portfolios with images of the work that they've done and the pictures of class projects. And then in addition, we go over not only the hard skills, but the soft skills required to be a really good worker.
Soft skills, what do you mean by that?
Showing up on time, being self-directed, staying one step ahead of where your coworkers might be, being kind and easy to work with, and helpful and team-oriented. Those things are just as important as knowing the actual technical hard skills.
It's amazing, Matt. I've gone to so many industry meetings or advisory meetings where people from other colleges and then also the field are coming in. Mm-hmm. And I can sabotage any meeting by starting a conversation about soft skills because people are very opinionated about it and they talk about the need for it within a lot of the career fields such as yours. And that's something I've noticed along the way.
Yeah.
Kind of what's your next frontier? What are you interested in just moving forward?
Good question. Well, I'm interested, in addition to energy efficiency, I'm interested in density and increasing housing in Oakland specifically, adding housing where there isn't some. And I also like cities where you don't have to drive as much. So I'm interested personally in, making Oakland a more accessible place where you don't have to drive everywhere and then people can live closer together. That's my personal interest. Whether or not we get there, we'll see. But.
Well, and one thing I remember just when I first met you was kind of that big picture look that you have about things way beyond the hammer, nails, and saw. Just, looking at the city, your involvement, your investment in tiny homes, and a lot of those things. Yeah. So if I'm interested in learning more about carpentry, how do I reach out to you?
Yeah, you can email me directly at mwolpe@peralta.edu. You can also go to our website, laney.edu/carpentry, and then that has a list of classes that has contact information for all the faculty and examples of previous projects. So I'd say that's the best bet. Go to our department website or come visit us.
And for the event on the 29th, the open house, people going into the carpentry area, what can they expect to see?
Yeah, they can expect to see a tiny house. Actually, 2 tiny houses. One is towards the finishing stage, and then one is in its rough stage. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I think that tells everything about the department right there. Yeah.
All right. So want to thank you for joining us today. But before we close, I have a kind of little trivia question for Felicia.
Okay.
Matthew and I have something in common. Any idea what it might be?
Aside from Denver, the Colorado angle, do you run or are you a long distance runner? No?
No, you might want to stay in the Colorado angle.
Okay. Skiing? I don't know. What?
Well, I'll give you another hint. We're about 20 years apart on this, but we went to the same high school
in
Denver.
Goodness, really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah, it was so funny because we had this. I was vice president of instruction at the time when Matt joined us, and I had a little kind of coffee meeting with all of the new faculty that came in, and he sat down and started talking about Denver, and I'm like, oh, Denver, which part? And then he starts talking about Washington Park, and then all of a sudden, where'd you go to high school? And then he said Denver South, and I said me too. Now, if you don't mind, and you can refuse to respond to this, but I was class of 1986. How about you?
2000. I was class of 2000. Yes,
gosh.
because it was
2000.
wow. I blanked down on
only
that,
14 years apart, not 20. I feel a little bit anyway.
Right, 2000. That's
great. Anyway, Matt, thanks again for joining us today.
Course.
And Allison, great to have you in the studio.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
As we wrap up another edition of the President's Desk, we want to thank our listeners up and down the great state of California, from as far north as the 717 and the 530, all the way down to SoCal in the 619, as well as our listeners right here in the 510, tuning in from Lake Merritt, Oakland Chinatown, downtown Oakland, West Oakland, East Lake, Fruitvale, Diamond, North Oakland, Adams Point, Central Oakland, East Oakland, the Oakland Hills, Montclair, Piedmont, and of course, those right here at the Laney campus listening to us today. As we close up shop at the President's Desk, straighten the chairs and turn the desk light off on today's program. Felicia, take us home.
Certainly. Thank you for tuning in to the President's Desk, a program available on radio and podcast, hosted by Laney College President Dr. Rudy Besikof. It airs each Wednesday at 2 a.m. and 2 p.m. on 96.9 KGPC. To listen to the podcast anytime, find us on kgpc969.org/programming and click on to the President's Desk. If you have a suggestion for a future show, please email us at laneypio@peralta.edu.